Today is the 52nd anniversary of Doug Engelbart's momentous demo. Doug was my friend and mentor, and I'd like to talk a little bit about why he did what he did, and then talk about what we are doing today that is so inspired by him. We're going to start with a reflection on the work of Doug with an introduction by Bint, a short presentation by SRI. I will then talk about Doug's philosophy of augmentation of symbols, and then we'll have an overview of a few of his specific augmentations. We'll then go over to what the difference is now, which in some ways obvious, but other ways maybe not. We'll then have a 5-minute presentation of what I call visual meta, which is an infrastructure designed to deal with a lot of issues that came up. Then we'll have 15 minutes to demo my software, and Howard and I will have a conversation around 15 minutes, and then we'll have roughly 30-minute dialogue as a group. But if you have any specific questions to what you see, please feel free to unmute and ask me as we go along.
Hello, my name is Vince Cerf. I'm Google's chief internet evangelist, and at the moment I'd like to remind you that this is the anniversary of Douglas Engelbart's renowned mother of all demos. Engelbart was at SRI International and developed something called the online system. He demonstrated it in 1968 on this day, and it led to a standing ovation. But it also led to a series of developments that allowed people to discover what it meant to interact with text through a computer-mediated text interaction. And here, 50 years plus later, Frode Hägglund has been exploring that same topic using much more powerful computers than Doug Engelbart had available, looking at ways in which we can experience text, the ways in which we can interact with it, use it to reach out into the World Wide Web, to pull information back, to correlate it, to observe the structure of documents and move things around in ways that are more graphical than the ones that Doug Engelbart had available at the time. So it's time for us to start thinking more deeply about the result of computer-mediated text and the things that we can expect out of it, the empowering and enabling character of that possibility. But I have to say, as you go down that path, the next thing you need to worry about is how do we preserve the ability to experience that content 100 years from now or 500 years from now. We need the moral equivalent of what I'll call digital vellum, simply to imply that whatever representation we have of this digital information is still understood and manipulable by the software of the age a century from now or more. So there's lots of issues associated with that, and I hope that you'll give that some thought as we try to look further into the future, even past where Doug Engelbart was looking over 50 years ago.
I'd like to read you something that Doug wrote in 2002. The thing that amazed me, even humbled me, about the digital computer when I first encountered it over 50 years ago, was that in the computer, I saw that we have a tool that does not just move earth or bend steel, but we have a tool that can actually manipulate symbols and, even more importantly, portray symbols in new ways so that we can interact with them and learn. We have a tool that radically extends our capabilities in the very area that makes us most human and most powerful. There's a Native American myth about the coyote, a native dog of the American prairie, how the coyote incurred the wrath of the gods by bringing fire down from the heaven for the use of mankind, making man more powerful than even the gods ever intended. My sense is that the computer science has brought us a gift of even greater power, the ability to amplify and extend our ability to manipulate symbols. We need to become better at being humans. Learning to use symbols and knowledge in new ways across groups, across cultures is powerful, valuable, and a very human goal. And it is also one that is obtainable. If we only begin to open our minds to full, complete use of computers to augment our most basic of human capabilities. Gets me every time, that one. Now we have a brief video from SRI. Sorry, just my mouse is playing up here, ironically.
If in your office, you as an intellectual worker were supplied with a computer display backed up by a computer that was alive for you all day and was instantly responsive, instantly responsive to every action you had, how much value could you derive from that? Well, this basically characterizes what we've been pursuing for many years in what we call the Augmented Human Intellect Research Center at Stanford Research Institute. We're going to try our best to show you rather than tell you about this program. Okay, there's Don Andrews' hand in Menlo Park. And in a second we'll see the screen that he's working and the way the tracking spot moves in conjunction with movements of that mouse. I don't know why we call it a mouse. Sometimes I apologize. It started that way and we never did change it. This characterizes the way I could sit here and look at a completely blank piece of paper. That's the way I start many projects. So with my system, that's a good start. I'll sit here and say, I'd like to load that in. So I'm putting in an entity called a statement, and that's full of other entities called words. And if I make some mistakes, I can back up a little bit. So I have a statement with some entities' words, and I can do some operations on these. I can copy a word. I can say that word like copy after itself. Let's make more statements. I'll say copy that statement, and lo and behold, I have another one. Copy that one, another one. I can even copy groups of statements. I can say after that one, copy the group from there to there, and it does. So let me jump back to the head of the list, and I can do things like begin to reorganize it a little bit. Well, I say after bananas, it's more likely that I'll take the carrots there. So let me organize it by saying just generally produce. All right, produce, I've got carrots, and I'll move under there also bananas. And in fact, I could move a whole group under there, saying oranges and apples also. Well, I'm going to do something called jump on a link. And a link is something that'll go between files. So what it's going to do, it says, I'm going to go to your file name as CNRO. So here's what I drew with a picture drawing capability here. It's a slight map if I start from work, and here's the route I seem to have to go to pick up all the materials. And that's my plan for getting home tonight. But if I want to, I can say, the library, what am I supposed to pick up there? I can just point to that, and oh, I see, overdue books and all. Well, there was a statement there with that name on it. So in his display, he sees my text, so I'll execute it, and sure enough it does. But what's that running around? Well, if he's looking at my text, he'd like to have something to say about it. So we put on a marker, a tracking spot that he controls. So he's sitting in Menlo Park looking at this text, and he can point to it. But we've carefully reserved for me the right to control and operate on this, so my bug is more powerful than yours. But we can have an argument. Yeah. That's what they call a bug fight. So we've set up now audio coupling, and then we're both looking at the same display, and that'd be very handy to work. We can talk to each other and point, and maybe later I could hand you the chalk on this blackboard, like saying, here, you control it. But let's stay this mode now and add another feature that hardware-wise is available through the kind of display we have. I'd like to see you while I'm working on it. And we're going to go for a picture down in our laboratory in Menlo Park and pipe it up. Come in, Menlo Park. Hi, Bill. That's great. Now we're connected audio. You can see my work. You can point at it. And I can see your face, and we can talk. So let's do some collaborating. And a forthcoming involvement is this ARPA computer network, the experimental network that's going to come into being in its first form in about a year and end up sometime later with some 20 experimental computers in a network, which would be enough so that I could be running a system in Cambridge over the network and getting the same kind of response on a CRT. And it may be that people there, the next time we have a conference in Boston, I'll try this from there. And in that network, we're going to tried to develop a special service to provide network information, relevant network information for people, for the kind of information that it takes to operate such a network. Who's got what services, what protocol do I use to get there, who's up to date, how much, where's the user's guide, where can I find the paper that describes this system that so-and-so offers. And that's going to be a very interesting challenge for us to utilize our tools for organizing and retrieving information.
Hair raising. So, in short, Doug wanted to raise our collective IQ. His statement in brief: we need to augment our collective capability to approach urgent, complex problems in order to gain more rapid and better comprehension to result in speedier and better solutions. I keep going back to this because people kept asking Doug, but what is this and what is that? And this is the core of every single thing he did, I feel very, very strongly. He also had another aspect, that we need to improve our improvement process as individuals and groups. He talked of co-evolution and bootstrapping. That is absolutely crucial, but that is not for this presentation. Today is only talking about manipulating symbols. I have a video screen of you guys on the side here, so I can't read everything, it's quite funny. But if we look at the categories of Doug's inventions in terms of capabilities, I would categorize them under flexible addressing and linking, rich interactions, and views. I'll go through a little bit of listy stuff. I'm not going to read everything, but there are a few things really worth highlighting. One of them under advanced linking is high resolution linking. You should be able to link to a specific part of a document, not just the whole document. You know, we're living in an era of fake news, and we now have this vaccine coming out and people are saying all kinds of things about that too. It would be nice when we read things, instead of someone just citing there is some kind of an article from Cambridge, show the specific bits. He also had implicit links. He had the notion that any word is linked to its entry in the dictionary, for instance. And then there's this bit he called, I mean, it's a joke, basic hypercharacteristics, but it's so powerful. I'm gonna try to move you guys so I can see this better myself. No, don't worry. Where embedded objects called links can point to an arbitrary object within the document of another document, and then they can do stuff. They can have an automatic process to get stuff from that other document and bring it in, or to execute something that's on the other end. We're talking about a whole different level of linking than the blue links we have today. You also had multiple links and link types, so you could choose from one single thing why you would want to go somewhere. Is it to get information? Is it to get a contrarian viewpoint, and so on? Furthermore, the links were in a database, so a document would know who links into it. And then this really interesting thing of links and images, as we saw on his demo. You remember in the early days of the web, we can do image maps. To do that now is, unless you're a specific designer, very hard. So we are in some ways progressing. Views. Views are a really big part of Doug's philosophy, the importance of having different views to change your perspective and change your mind. The ones listed here seem a little bit boring, because don't forget, he worked with basically a few lines of text on a screen, much lower resolution in a sense than what we have today. But he still had things like structure cutoff, where you can say, I only want to see the first line of every paragraph in a document. I only want to see to level so-and-so. There are many ways we could do that, but he also, along the notion of addressing, the statements, which we would generally think of just paragraphs, could have their own addresses. And of course, user-specified content filters, which is hugely interesting, where you can set exactly what kind of things you want to see. one really important thing that he had was called a journal, which is basically a server. You post a document, you can never change it. If you post the same document again, it makes it version 2. Considering the issues we have with link rot and DNS deaths and so on today, to get back to a basic, robust versioning system would be very nice. So command language in Augment/NLS, his system was first called NLS because it was an online system, and later Augment. The user could enter a command string. This wasn't like DOS. It was something you would write out. You could write something like, open a document, you write the document name, and then you will write colon, and then you could write O, for instance, if you wanted to see an outline. So it became kind of a language that you would get used to. And I know Valentina's a bit mad at me because I have note to self, because I don't have presenter notes presenting here on Zoom. I did a test with Doug many, many years ago, where I had a brand spanking new Mac laptop with all the fancy things. And he was sitting there with Augment. And this was very old at the time. And that's okay. Help me understand better why it's powerful, why you stay using it. So we decided to have a competition. We were going to look up the phone number of a mutual friend. Doug put his hands on the keyboard, didn't break eye contact with me, and then he told me the number. I had to open things, find things, click things. I took forever. What he did, he typed in open document called address book, scroll down to the bit that has this person's name, and show me the entry. So it was a very rich command language, something that I think we can really look into today. These things are listed online. This presentation will be online. There will be links, but if you want to look at a specific issue list, you can go to futureoftext.org/Doug-Engelbart.html. So before we get on to what's different now, let's make it very, very clear that Doug wasn't interested in specific capabilities or specific things. He was interested in how they connected into a capability infrastructure, which is crucial. And I know many of you here from before, and I know you're very aware of this, but it's worth highlighting. He liked to have 2 columns. One was the human system, which is basically stuff we learn. Tool system, basically machinery, be it mental machinery or physical machinery. But this, we mustn't forget, is based on the basic human physiological system. So there are no single capability in here. In his drawings, which you may very well have seen, he had a lot of lines going all over the screen here. I think that's kind of ugly. And also to really emphasize his point that all of these are connected to basically all the other ones, we don't need that. So what's different today? Today we have Command C. I love to highlight that one because many people today know basic keyboard shortcuts. In his time, people were completely naive to the computer. We also have Facebook tagging. People are used to using computers to tag things. On the tool side, we have PDFs, DOIs, web DNS, we have all these things. And that means he had to invent or co-invent basically everything. Now we have to invent within a digital world that exists. So that is, of course, a world with constraints, as Les keeps telling me with great frequency. And powerful computers, as Vint mentioned, but also powerful libraries and technologies that we can employ. He invented and showed us entirely new worlds. But the problem is many today think we're living in the future and we don't need any further innovation. We have blue links, texting, spell check, and social media. What more could we possibly need? It's hard to get a lot of people excited. And that means we have to provide solutions to specific problems. Writing itself, Yuval Noah Harari highlights, they didn't invent it in order to copy spoken language, but rather to do things that spoken language failed at. Crucial, because writing shouldn't try to copy language. And then second and last note to self from about Sumer. It turns out that writing, when it started in Sumeria, became more used as the empire contracted, not as it expanded. When they had to manage their resources, that's when they really needed writing. Mark Kurlansky writes, technological inventions have always risen from necessity. The Europeans had no use for paper until more than 1,000 years after the Chinese invented it. The Arabs have been trying to sell it to them for years. But it wasn't until they began learning the new ways of mathematics and science that they needed it, something that basic. So we have to do the same thing, answer specific needs. And then of course, we need to smuggle in deeper interactions as part of that package. So specifically, the problem I'm addressing with the augmented text tools that I've developed is to provide useful augmentations on frozen PDF documents while keeping the robustness of pre-digital and analog documents for linking and storage, to help students author more thoughtful and connected papers, as well as read and interact with sources more thoroughly. That's my mission statement. The work that I'm doing with augmented text has nothing to do with social media or documents that can be edited forever like Google Docs. It is to help a student please their teacher. I think that is a model for other innovations later. These have been categorized under augmented citing, augmented glossaries, augmented interactions and implicit linking, and augmented views. Ultimately, of course, the point is to contribute to deeper literacies, as I think we all in this group agreeing is crucial. So I've written a few words on this so I don't take too much time. My philosophy of augmented text, I'd like to make just 2 points, but I'd like to make them strongly. I should click certain down. Interactivity. I believe that the most fundamental aspect of existence is interactivity, not information, since interactivity is what creates information and makes information accessible. Therefore, the richer the interactivity, the more valuable the information becomes to us. We should investigate what Vint calls computational text, which Brett Victor and others have worked on. As a basic example, if I write next Tuesday, then maybe the text should change to today on Tuesday, and last Tuesday for a week, and then Tuesday the 15th or whatever. Let's have documents do currency conversions and time zone conversions inline live if the user wants. Why not? Let's infuse the documents with magic. This is why it's a bit of a horror when we freeze what we have been working on into PDF documents to make it public, to share it. I will address that later. Addressing. Yeah, that bit underneath there is just a highlight. I believe it's fundamental. Addressability. It's not just links. It is about addressing. By addressing, I mean how we can refer to things. This goes from how we can point to something on screen to how we can refer to something outside of the screen. This includes hyperlinking, but keep in mind that digital links are really just a direction for where to look for a document. It also includes citations, which are more like descriptions of what is being addressed, which can be in any location. And of course, there's DOIs, which aim to bring links and citations together.
You have a document in which you're writing things, and the traditional thing of putting a footnote to a citation or a reference to some other document. And so you say, oh, I could do that so my references pointed to the other document, and you just go click. Oh, that's easy. Well, why not be able to go to a particular passage in that document? And so that's the way we assumed linking would be done in the long ago days, and we were doing it that way.
High resolution addressability is a big Doug feature, where you can address parts of documents, not just the document. This is for manual traversal as well as programmatic, and to have the ability to reach into documents and get information or perform actions, as discussed earlier. The potential here is vast. We're working on that, and we're working on ways of making citations more robust, as I'll get into in a minute, when presenting visual meta. As I like to say, if you can't address something, you can't address it. Self-aware PDF documents, visual meta. The aim is to create more richly interactive environments and to work to make the elements of the environment aware of themselves, what their characteristics are, and their context. I'm really gonna have to try to make you guys a bit smaller on the side here, sorry. Do you all have the problem with the cursor disappearing when you're on Zoom? Anyway, the point is to let documents know more about who they are, how to cite them, what they contain, and how they are structured. The point is to make virtual information landscapes, not just frozen pixels. So here is paper meta. You open up any average book. In the first page, you will have information about how to cite the book, who printed it, the ISBN number, and the author, the title, and so on. And here you have PDF meta. No, I'm just kidding, it's a joke. There's no such thing as PDF meta. I actually joined the PDF Association to learn why hardly any PDF downloaded from any major repository has any meta information. And I could spend this whole entire session trying to explain how convoluted it is. So here's the idea for visual meta. Instead of having that stuff in the beginning, we add an appended page at the end where we write down in plain English the same kind of thing. So the visual meta introduces itself and then it continues. And this is where someone may stop me and say, hang on, why are you introducing another thing? And then I like to show this cartoon. I'm sure most of you have seen it. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. Ridiculous, we need one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah, soon, there are 15 competing standards. Visual meta is not a new standard. It is just BibTeX with a bit of JSON. It is industry standard, academia standard. All it is being used for is a novel situation of adding it to the end of a document. So after the introduction, it has completely normal BibTeX, the author, title, year, and so on. This is followed by the structure of the document, the headings, and in some cases, if there is a contributing author, the name of the author. Here is the visual meta for the book, The Future of Text, that we launched just a little over 2 weeks ago. The benefits, you get advanced interactions while reading. I'll show you a little bit of that in the demo, despite being a frozen document. You get augmented copy. I'll also show you that. Here's the thing, it's presentation neutral, which means that a student or somebody could author a paper in a certain citation style. Their professor can be really annoyed at this and say, show it in this different style. Because the structure is included, that should be possible. It enables computational text like we were talking about earlier, because it specifies what's what in the document. It has server surfacing. If this is on a server that understands visual meta, it can go through, read this, and it can even know what are inside tables and images and so on. And finally, it is legacy safe because it's just text, just normal text at the same level, which also has the benefit of robustness. You can print out a PDF that has visual meta, do whatever you want, scan it again, run OCR, and you still have the entire intelligence still there. So for the software, this is how I'm addressing the main Doug themes. It looks a bit messy, but it gets even messier when you look at the software here. Before I show you the pieces, a few things to mention. They are all currently macOS only. And the name author is called author because augment and author etymologically have the same roots. If you go quite far back, they both mean to enlarge and to make something bigger. So when I realized that, I was very excited. And I'm also extremely excited to kind of own this on the Mac App Store. Author is a word processor. Reader is a PDF viewer, and Liquid is an interaction tool. The way they work, and by the way, since you're all here, if you would like author, which I usually charge for, please send me a message and I'll give you a code, you get it for free. The other tools are free anyway. It works like this. Well, this is the workflow. You do your authoring in Author, surprise, surprise. Export as a PDF. PDF, of course, has visual meta. And Reader then parses this visual meta. Reader is a PDF viewer, which is aware of the visual meta. Liquid is my oldest tool. It works in a PDF document, but it pretty much works everywhere else on macOS. There will be a major update. I hope to have it ready today, but we will be submitting it tomorrow. You know how it is, fresh software. It'll be in the Mac App Store on Friday. So we go to Reader. Here is the PDF version of our book, The Future of Text. First thing I want to show you is this little thing here. I use the escape key to go into full screen and out of full screen. which is a very handy way of getting to have a thinking space and going out of it. I now do, well, I can go through the document as normal, of course, but if I do Command minus, that folds the document into an outline. So let's scroll through some of the contributors. It's a big book. I hope you all have it already. Click on Tom. He is writing about GPT-2. I would like to know who else is writing about GPT-2. So I select it and I do Command F. And it shows me all the lines in the document which feature that text. You may notice that some of the lines are gray. Those are the two lines above and below the found results. So here I can see that Richard Carter is talking about it, and Wendy Hall, who may be here, she wasn't sure if she could make it, is also talking about it. I can now click on any of those paragraphs to jump to it, or just do Command F to go back out, because I have the information I wanted. I'm now going to copy this bit. Just select it and do a normal Command C. Sorry about the loud clicking, my microphone's on my laptop. We go to author, away from reader. I will escape into full screen, it's prettier. And paste, Command B, just normal paste. And this is what we got. It pasted it as a full citation. So what actually happened was that we copied the selected text and the visual meta was included when we copied across. That's why we have this. Or I'm not writing a whole book. So now I made citations, that text there, a heading. I did Command 1, because you can't really mess with type in author. You have to specify something, what it is. We're now going to go back to the book, go to another page, copy something from tool, go back to author, and I'm going to paste that here. And you can see here below in the references that's automatically listed. By the way, if I click on the enter in the references or in the text, we get this citation screen. Please note that even though it was from the book of many contributors, I'm listed as the editor down here. The author is listed properly up here. That's because of what I mentioned earlier. The visual meta says per heading who the author is if there's more than one author. We're going to do two more citation types. One of them is an author, like a lot of you. So I'm just going to do Command T for citation. And I had copied his name, so that's already there. Hit enter to search. Yes, the user illusion is the one I want to cite. Hit enter again. This looks good. Hit enter again. And now he's cited. And now we're going to do citation from DOI, which is currently extremely slow, but we are working on improving it. We're hopefully will by Friday. There's lots of technical boring details around that. So all I did, sorry, I was talking and not showing you. I copied the DOI of the document I want to cite, and then I paste that in. At least we have the spinner that's new, and here it is. So that's automatically resolved into the document. Command E to export. And export, we can also export to WordPress and lots of other fun things. But today we're focusing on one workflow. So we're going to export as a PDF. We're going to give it document a title. Just call it name of the day. And this is a cover sheet, which we don't need. Page numbers, Les would want page numbers, but we're not going to bother. There's only one page. Automatic heading numbers, no. All these nice options. Obviously, we need to make sure we have visual meta included. Save that to the desktop. Go to the desktop and open this document into Reader. Here it is, automatically presented references. And notice that I had chosen to have the citations in square brackets. So you choose that at the point of export, not at the point of working. So here's a really neat thing. And this, I'm glad is being recorded, because this feature, first of all, how amazing is that? You don't have to go to the back of the document to check the reference. You click on it, you get all the information there. You can even interact with this text if you want to search further. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. This is the result of long coffee at University of Southampton with Mark Anderson. This is what he requested, and it's pretty genius, right? I think it's pretty genius, so we just had to put it in there. We're now going to go back to the book, go through a few views. If I hit N for name, it reorganizes the document to show any names in the document, which is just one experimental way of having different views. Yeah, that means it's not implemented. I will tell you about that later. It's about glossary. We have Z zooms in one level, which is surprisingly useful. A lot of PDFs still think you're going to print them out, so they have huge margins. So Z to go in and out is very useful. And now this is very interesting, this word. So I'll select it and do H. There's another interesting word. Oh, here's an interesting sentence, H. Highlight. So just select text and H to highlight. Now that that's done, if I don't have text selected and I do H, there it is. So you can instantly see which bits you've highlighted. We are going to be building in different colors. So you can highlight red, green, and so on, depending on your own semantic meaning, which should then make it fast to go through the documents. You can also, and this is for the teachers out there, X to strike out nonsense. So now in this document, going back to author. So Doug felt that glossaries are useful. So I'm just going to create a glossary entry real quick. I'm not going to waste your time writing a lot. So I select Doug Engelbart, do Command G for glossary, and I get this dialog. And the glossary in Doug's world and in mine just means a local definition. So I'm not going to write about Doug Engelbart, the inventor, and all that official stuff. I just write Doug Engelbart, my friend and mentor. Click OK. And now you see we have a section automatically created. I'm not sure if it's clear on your screen, but both glossary and references are gray. It's not the same text as the rest. So I can actually click on that and edit it in the future, same as I can click on the citation. So we're exporting this now. I'm going to give it that name with glossary. Open that. So now, do you remember if we did Command F, we saw all the occurrences, right? If we now search for Doug Engelbart and do Command F, the glossary entry appears at the top of the screen. I'm just looking at your faces. Somebody must think this is cool. I think this is super cool. In the book, The Future of Text, we have glossary entries for all the authors. So select name, Command F, and in addition to seeing where that person is mentioned, you also get the glossary entry at the top of the screen. The logic behind doing it this way and not having the glossary entry too easily viewable is that the point is you're reading something and you want to know more about something. So what are you going to do? Find is one of those natural actions. So you do that and you will find this extra information on top. Now we're down to the last two bits to show you guys. So I'm reading here, and Ben Schneiderman is talking about Daguerre. Who's that? Look it up in Wikipedia. That was pretty quick, right? What we used here is the liquid interaction. So you select whatever text you want to look up. Do Command keyboard shortcut. I do Command space. You can set it to anything you like. And then you get that text lifted into the liquid interface, which floats above here. When it's on Big Sur, it's all very white on white, but I'm sure you can see it. So in the case of looking it up in Wikipedia, I clicked R for references and then W for Wikipedia. That's how quick it was. You can use this basically anywhere. So let's just look up a picture from French. Search images. You can go on forever and ever. I'll show you an overview of what the commands are. You have all kinds of searches, and you can add your own. References. If it's a number, it'll do conversions for you. It'll translate. Let's show you that because that's kind of cool, actually. Translate English, Japanese. TEJ. Here it is. If you need it, you can copy it, except for when Google says no. Finally, I will go back to author. I will close this document and open one I have created earlier. Isn't that what they say? For full screen. Author has a very, very sparse interface. I believe that tool should be in the hand, information in the eye. Very few buttons, but you may notice at the bottom of the screen says how many words there are in the document. And then in the middle, it says dynamic view / word processing view. If I click on that, I get this view. And here I have a free form thinking space where I can put anything I want. Let's add this text anywhere I want. I option drag it to add it to this. I can make it a italic or whatever type that I want. But you may have noticed that there are different colors. I select all, you can see it easier. The ones that are blue because they are in the document itself, the word processing view. So let's say I double click on a blue one, it does a search, a find, same as I did a find in the document. Click in the margin to go back. So this is very useful to work out how things relate and to see if you've written it. If you remember the Doug demo where he had a drawing of where he was going to do his shopping, this is very much inspired by that. I'm now going to do Command D to return to the word processing view and select the word glossary and do Command D again. It copied the word glossary into this view. The point of that is it makes it very quick to populate this view.
Freud, there's a question. Yeah. I don't know if I should interrupt you or...
Yeah, this is good. I'm almost done. So now's a good time for a question.
Okay. So can reader also be connected to existing citation managers to read the citation info and create its own visual meta, or does integrating this into an existing workflow require one to manually create visual meta for all their saved articles? And then it also says, I understand that the focus and the value here is more for the potential to change everything. But practically, I'm curious about the barriers to implementing this into a daily workflow. And this is from Michael Schulman.
Hello, Michael. I don't know you, so I'll answer that politely. 1 second. I will answer it by showing you something. Okay, the connection is a bit slow because I'm spending it all on video with you guys. But yeah, that is a concern. It isn't integrated very much in and of itself as it is now, with one exception. If you open a PDF that has a DOI on the first page, it will ask you if it should automatically append the visual meta to that document. So I'm not sure, yeah, no, this is way too old. I'm not going to waste your time on that, but that's something you can try. It'll open it up and you get it. I am hoping that the visual meta approach can slowly seep into use, but initially, thanks, I can see your reaction there. The initial point is Les Carr. He is my advisor, so I'm designing this for one user, that is me, to please him. Because even though I'm an adult, I'm 52, which is, you know, same as Doug's demo. I represent an average student. So what Les wants, Les gets, right? Did that answer your question? Yeah, I did it though, thank you. So finally, if you double click on something that is orange, it asks you, do you want to insert it at the end of the document? Reason for that is you may have this wonderful organized view, but you're missing stuff. So you click insert, and then you can just type about it. The very last thing, the margins are also dynamic views. You see, they don't follow the document, so they're not annotations. The point of them are that if you have something that you know needs to go on your document, you just don't know where to put it, you can put it in the margin, and it has the same behavior. So if you put something like URL, oh, sorry, that hasn't been updated from here, from the other one. You should be able to double click on that and see where it is in the document, just like you did for the dynamic view. And finally, thank you very much. Any questions for the actual demo?
Yeah, there's another question from David. How openly extensible is it? Can we add our own functionality?
No. Not at this point. This is a small, tiny passion project, but this has to be done with a community. So very happily have a discussion with you how to add things, but I can't afford at this point to open it up in that sense. However, like the Mark Anderson feature you saw in there, there is a lot of user feedback. I have one single programmer, Jacob Hazelgrove, in California, in the United States. He's wonderful. We'll try to put it in. But yes, that is the goal at some point, to make this so open that people can put it in any directions they like.
So we're having quite a few questions coming in. Shall I just read them all out to you, and then you can choose whether to go into them now or take them for the dialogue section?
Sorry, we can do, yeah, let's do the questions now. If they're quick, I'll answer them. If not, I will ask you to hold on to them, yeah.
Okay, what about support for other operating systems?
When we sell enough of these to afford it, I'd love to, so please help with the marketing, and we'll see what we can do.
And there's a comment about that this is very similar to a thought experiment editor that Alan has been working on, and he's rather stunned. Then there's a question, what about export to HTML or JSON, this section being references?
We already export to HTML when we upload to WordPress, but it's directly to that. We don't do JSON export, and I have no idea why, but if you would send me a message, I would love to discuss that.
Okay, then does visual meta have implications on understanding and writing code in general?
No, not writing code, I would think, but the thing about visual meta that excites me, and at some other time I can tell you how it came about, but it is that when you write code, things happen. I don't write code, so it's not something that I think about. But when you write into visual meta, you are keeping that logic and intelligence. So there may be something there. I would love to consider that more. So please send me a message and we can have a dialogue in some other medium about that. Thank you for that.
About visual meta, which common programming languages like JavaScript do you already have for passing visual meta out from the source document?
I have no idea. Jacob, who does the programming, he uses Swift and all kinds of Apple stuff. But it is very important for us to make that public. So if you'd like to send me a message, we'll give you what we have to make that easy for you.
Okay, and the graph view is scoped to the doc. Is that correct?
What was that? Scoped to the doc?
Yes.
I can elaborate on that. I just was trying to type fast. The graph view, is it one graph sort of per document, or does the graph represent a series of docs that are otherwise not connected?
Currently, it is one thinking space for one document. Two reasons for that. One is this is about helping a student write a paper.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really focused around that. Secondly, even putting citations into the dynamic view is a challenge because it becomes overwhelmingly messy very, very quickly. So I would like to have a way where you can use that kind of a view to see a world of documents and connections, but that's going to be.
Could you try again?
No, sorry, that was my watch. That's the world we're living in today. I would love to have discussions with that with other people, including you. What I mean is it's a big deal, and we just have to remember that a node is not a neuron.
Right.
You know, there's some,
Definitely.
yeah, thank you. Hugely interesting. But many more questions, or should
So
Howard
there's
start?
comment around maybe a second implementation as an electron-based application could address the cross-platform consideration. That's quite a lot of messages around Electron. So I don't know whether you want to address that.
Address what? I didn't understand that word. It sounded like lectern.
Electron?
Electron as a way to make Mac apps that you can essentially use web browser code, not have to write it in Swift. So it's a, I don't know who asked that, but it's a technical question.
Oh, right. Okay, well, this is kind of leading into talking to Howard because I don't care. And the reason for that is I represent the user, and I'm really scared of representing too much of the innards of the system. Like I look at it, some people are intelligent enough to be an engineer and an architect and an interior designer and an environment designer. I don't have that level of brain power. So if there's a community need for something and it makes sense, yeah, absolutely do it. But I don't have the understanding to have a perspective on that yet.
So there's a few more questions, and some are quite small. And I think maybe the best way to do it is for us to go back to the chat later on and maybe email each one of the people who have sent the questions.
Well, now that I'm out of that view, do you ever plan to make this open source? I don't, I'll just go through them. They're quite easy. Do I plan to make it open source? It's another one of those, I don't care. What I really care about is supporting a community around visual meta, because that's entirely open. Anybody can specify anything they want in any way, because it just uses BibTeX. So if someone is competing with me to make the best reader or author or whatever it is, fantastic, let's have a competition. At some point, yes, we could open source components of it, but it's the interoperation that we need. You see, that relates to a really important point that I wasn't going to discuss, but it is about the bootstrapping and the co-evolution and all of that stuff. Programmers like me, and there are some of you here, when I say programmers, I mean developers, how are we ever going to make money? You know, we're up against Apple and Google and all of these people. It's really, really hard. So we need to find ways to make the best little Mont Blanc pen and sell it, but to make sure we share the paper. You know what I mean? So just making it open source suits some, maybe not this, I don't know. But we need to work together to make sure we all get paid somehow. Otherwise, this ecosystem just collapses. Was that controversial? No, good.
Agreed.
So as a kind of a follow-up to that, are you wanting developers to compete with you kind of and see how much we can improve this software? What are the ideas there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an artist by birth. I went to Chelsea School of Art, and how I ended up with Les Carr and Wendy Hall is a long story. But the point is, I have a burning desire to create. If it was up to me, I'd be out taking pictures right now, not doing this stuff with you guys. The reason I do it is because I find it shocking how little investment there is in the future of text in general. So I want to be completely honest with you. I want to make a tool system that I really, really, really like and compete with you. But we have to have means to interrelate our stuff. Because, you know, as an artist, if you start saying that the dynamic view should be purple or whatever it might be, it may be a useful discussion, it may be not, but you need one person per project to make a decision. But when it comes to how we share that information from your app to my app, that's where I think something like the approach of visual meta can be very valuable, because it is literally the most open format you could imagine. You cannot hide anything. You can't obfuscate anything.
the follow-on question that is aimed at the artistic. I'm curious. You mentioned, the command hotkey essentially being one of the greatest innovations, and I agree. It's a step beyond writing. I think that there are others that we use a lot that are either typographic or not. But I'd be curious as to, do you look at either shortcuts or I'll say shortcuts that are underutilized, that there's more opportunity to take advantage of in the same way as command space?
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes. I mean, I expect most of you here will know Doug's work, and you will know that he had a keyboard and a mouse, but the mouse said he wanted at least 5 buttons, ended up with 1 for practical reasons, and he had a corded key sets. I mean, look at people talk about having electrodes into the brain to read the brain directly, but we have incredible hands that are wired into our brains with incredible freedom of movement. Yes, I'm pretty sure that we can provide rich, even if it's through the keyboard, richer interactions with keyboard shortcuts, mice things and all of that, hugely important. So that's just an area we should just explode. Hello, Andlar. Yeah, did someone ask a question? Actually, why don't we go onto a chat with Howard, and then, because now it seems to be a little free-forming. Howard, is that good timing for you?
It's 7 p.m.
Oops. Oops, I think you got, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sure. A few years ago, there was a symposium at Stanford called The Unfinished Revolution. What do you think is still the most unfinished part?
I really think it goes to the traditional Doug dialogue. Half of it is, how do we invest in this? Doug had the notion of ABC level work. A level is the work we're doing right now. B is how you improve it, like the software that I make and others make. C is how do you improve the process of improvement? That has to be invested in. It's crazy how rewards are and so on today. That's half of it. But the other half of it is, and some of you who's joined me on the journey of the future of text book know I keep saying it, it's really hard to see text. When I talk to people about text, they maybe talk about font, or they talk about what is written in the text. But to look from what you saw earlier today, when Doug looked at text, he saw symbols. He didn't use the word text. He called it symbol manipulation. Programmers can do amazing things. Everybody needs not just to read a flat book, but to tear it to shreds like a sculpture. So I really think the unfinished revolution are those two things. How can we, he wrote that poem, in the very last sentence was, it is obtainable to become better human beings if we only begin to open our minds to full, complete use of computers to augment our most human of capabilities, learning to use symbols and knowledge in new ways.
Do you know of any organizations that actually have committed to C work? I know, talking to Doug over the years, that was one of the things he was trying to do, and running up against the issue that so many organizations, they know that, their purpose is A work, and B work is pretty essential for competition, but C work's a little bit removed from the day-to-day. You see anybody making any inroads with that?
No. What we are trying to do as a community is, however, on the 25th of February, we're going to have an inaugural meeting for the 2nd edition of the book. The point of that meeting is to generate wider diversity. And that means diversity of cultures, of thoughts, of every kind of diversity. That means we're going to actually have to tell people to be interested in text. That in itself is a challenge. But the reason I'm raising this up as kind of a C level is that we have to find out how to support ourselves developing the kind of things like the book, which will help people to the next level. It's really pathetic. It's a tiny little effort But the greater answer to that is just no. And you know, how can we, you know, academia has its own reward system, which Doug did not understand, because he was the most sweetest guy in the world, but he didn't of course he understood it intellectually, but in his heart, different ways of why would people do that. We have to take into account careers. We have to take into account rewards to make it possible. I mean, Wendy Hall and Les Carr, you know, wonderful people. They have a lot to do. To actually get a meeting with them where they can get funding to try to do something on this level, it's very difficult. It is not their fault. It's the institutional way that universities and business work nowadays.
Have you talked with Gardner Campbell about this? He's, you know, one academic I know who's really been dedicated to not only teaching Engelbart, but leading some collaborative annotation of his documents.
No, but I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, you should talk with him.
Yes. Valentina, could you please make a note?
So you mentioned computational text. What do you mean?
That was Vint Cerf's idea. It came up a few months ago. And it's very much like what Brett Victor has done, where you have text, and then in the middle of a sentence, you may have 3 + 4, and you click on the 4 and you make it 5 and it gives a different results. It can be many things. It can be the example I gave earlier of just writing a next Tuesday, and then the grammar changes over time if you wanted to. It can be actually putting living code in a document. There are, of course, some projects doing this. Their names escape me right now. Could anyone remember what they're called?
Do you mean Rome Research?
No, I wasn't thinking about Rome. They do interesting things like that too, but I was thinking Jupyter Notebooks is what I was thinking about. But yeah, so there are things happening in those spaces, but the problem is they're all information ghettos. And that's why we really, really need something like Visual Meta. You need to be able to export from Rome or copy a node from Rome, and Rome will either as the software or as you as the user have said, when you're copying from Rome, this is how much you're allowed to take with you. Imagine if the whole entire section you're working on is included as a reference in a PDF. Someone else reads it, clicks on it. If they're a Rome user, bam, it's all there live.
How do you expect to get the innovations that you've been working on, that you've been showing us, into more widespread use?
This is how. Talking to core interested people who see this on Twitter or as part of the book and want to have a dialogue and fight me for ideas over coffee when we can do that in the future. But it really, the focus now is sitting there, Les Carr. I'm writing from one student to one teacher, and then Valentina is helping me spread the word to other educational institutions that this can happen. Les had a fantastic idea that I want to implement, which is when you read a student's document or a research document, you go to the reference section and you have the opportunity to change the view of the references. So for instance, it'll show you with headings, so you can see where in the document citations are and frequency of use. Scholarcy does amazing analysis of academic documents. So maybe we could put in, this document is been disputed, so it's red. And Timur, I hope Timur is still here. One of the things we talked about many, many years ago in Croatia was run some machine learning on vast corpuses of student papers. So when a teacher who has little time is looking at a screen like we're looking at now, and if, let's say, a student is depressed, that may have a little red warning on it. So a commercial thing that I'm hoping to be able to do at some point is when the teacher opens a student document that has been saved with Visual Meta, it'll run analysis on that document immediately. Grammar level, what's the word? Plagiarism, and also emotional things like we just talked about. So the teacher will say, this is rated below your threshold. Click here to send a report back to the student saying this is what needs to be fixed. Teacher time is very, very expensive. I've been a teacher myself. The less clerical work a teacher can do, as you very well know, Howard, having inspired me in this particular area, the better. The human side needs to be there. So that's how I'm hoping to commercialize it more by making it more useful for student-teacher relationship. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
Well, you touched on students. How can you make this available to students, more available to students?
Well, it will be within the Mac ecosystem, because the M1 chip is opening up opportunities that are just insane. Finally, ML is coming into my world in ways that I don't dare think about yet, and love to talk to you guys about that. But I sell it for $10. It's not expensive. All the other tools are free. You know, if there is funding out there, of course I'll give it out for free. I just need to pay for my programming. But I don't think that, you know, 2 lattes at Starbucks is too much to pay for your for a new authoring environment. Because to students, we try to appeal with the fact that you read something in a PDF, you copy and paste, boom, you never have to worry about citations. If you want to use a citation manager because of volume, you're welcome to it, but there's no practical reason anymore. And it also means with a copy and paste, errors don't creep in.
Well, you know, there are a couple of knowledge management systems, personal knowledge management systems. The personal brain is the one that I'm familiar with, but now you're seeing Rome research. Do you see a connection? I mean, those are about knowledge, and there's a connection between knowledge and augmentation. How do you see connecting the knowledge management tools with the kind of text and augmentation tools?
One of the first surprises for me when I started writing the Introduction to the Future of Text book may seem childish to you, but it was the strong realization that there's different types of text. There's poetry, there's a warning sign, there's scientific writing, academic writing, and so on. It was just such a big, it's obvious, but at the same time, something to reflect on. The reason I'm mentioning it is those kinds of things happening with Notion and Rome and all of that stuff is absolutely amazing. It's also for a very different type of interaction. It is about the knowledge and the learning. In order to, the only times I've made even a little bit of progress with my work has been when I've reduced the scope and not made it bigger. So augmented text in the way it's implemented now is purely to help make and read a document. That's it. But do I believe that there is opportunities for integration with these other systems? Absolutely. That would be an absolutely heavenly thing to be able to do that. And I believe that the Trojan horse is the glossary. I've spent so many years working on glossary things, and Jury and Jack both are aware of some of those dialogues. And the thing is, the way the glossary has been implemented now is so super simple. It is the least possible fancy glossary system you could imagine. But the whole point of that is that if you were in Notion and you had special text in Notion that you put into a word processing thing and go back, they could be stored as glossary terms with as many tags and attributes as you want. So when we talk,
I'm seeing in the text that a lot of people are noting that there are a number of these knowledge management, personal knowledge management systems that are proliferating. You know, last time I wrote a book, I used DevenThink for the Mac, and it had an extension that would enable me to select a snippet and send that to my database and tag it. And it seems to me that that might be a way of connecting what you're doing with what they're doing, of just enabling to import into those systems in a way that contains some of the functionality that you've been talking about.
Oh, absolutely. That's what's so exciting about the citation copy, where you just copy from a PDF with visual meta and paste it. It's exactly that. The clipboard can have so many different things in it. And if we could have a nerdy forum of clipboard soup, where I can imagine people and organizations coming together saying, if you copy from my app these certain things, I'll give you all of this extra goodies in the clipboard that you can use in these ways. Oh, you wanted something else? Let me do something else. It becomes the magical API. I completely agree with you, Howard. The opportunity of what can be done with normal copy and paste, if you put extra stuff in, is amazing.
What about, what do you think the top Engelbart innovations are in interactive text that you are not working on, that someone else ought to work on?
There were a few on the slides we looked at earlier. I would say that the Notion kind of people are working more on structured text. It gets a bit closer to each. He had statement, you know, I just have paragraphs. They have specific pieces of knowledge in there. I'm not working on that, they're working on that. But other things, I mean, there's one thing that Doug and I tested, which is to have a visual color glossary. So all we did for one type of work, we manually wrote a glossary where every word that was about technology would be yellow. Every word had something to do with a person, blue. Company is green. I can't remember all the colors, but it was something like that. And we applied it to his 62 paper. And when you then scroll through it, even at high speed, you could easily see which section talked about what kind of topic. It was amazing. That is something, that level of visualization that he even hinted at could be bigger. A way to implement that could be when you move the scrolling wheel on a document, then the color happens, but it doesn't happen when you stop moving. So it's not obnoxious. Ways where you could tear this apart into a huge knowledge tree, a graph, and put it back together again. And if Doug was around today, I think his understanding of what machine learning could do to this would be hugely influential. But we have to guess what he might want to do.
Well, you brought machine learning into this. How do you think machine learning and augmentation could meet?
One of the things that you saw today was press N and it shows you all the names in the documents. That's a machine learning API we got from Apple that we're using, and it's kind of neat. But now we have the M1 chips coming. That means we can do things like more natural language processing for normal documents. So you click on someone's name and you do Command F. It shouldn't just find occurrences of that text. It should also find, if it was a man, it would also find sentences where he blah, 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 because grammatically it knows where it came from. So it can give you means to literally get your hands in and do more. You know, machine language learning, I don't think of it as AI or clever, but I think it is amazing as a pattern thing. We use it for speech recognition and picture tagging, of course. And even these basic things for a human, I think can be tremendously powerful in this environment. But we need to experiment and experiment.
You know, some systems like annotation and others that I've seen offer an overlay to the web. I think I've seen some overlays to Wikipedia as well. Is there a way that you could kind of marry the web as it exists to what you're doing so that you could see Wikipedia through your tools?
That's an interesting question. I remember when I was studying art and I was doing something to a picture and then I added a thing here. And then my art teacher, she said, stop. At some point, it's finished. You have to put a frame on it. And that's something that I think is missing from a lot of this. My philosophy is that of liquid information. But if information is completely liquid, it is useless. So we need to put frames around the work. That is why I am very focused on the production of a document. You publicize it, you make it a thing here. Keep it frozen. Howard, what was the question again? Oh, Wikipedia on the web, sorry. So,
well, yeah, and turning what you're doing as for individuals into something that could be overlaid on the web.
I would find that very, very difficult because academic discourse is someone makes a statement in a document and it is cited. If that can get messy, so to speak, by having layers of stuff on top of it, it is something that I don't think I'm clever enough to deal with now, but I accept that that would be very worthwhile to try to address.
So, final question: who would you like to collaborate with, and if you know, on what?
I have two answers to that. One is I want Apple to give me lots of attention, so I'm featured on the App Store. And I think that goes for the community. My dream is that instead of the next version of the Mac being Mac OS X whatever, it would actually be called Mac OS Text, where instead of focusing on all the superficial other things, the operating system is really, really optimized to allow for us to make these environments together. That's half of the answer. The other half of the answer is anybody who gives a monkey. Because where interest comes from, as we specifically have seen, having hosted the Future of Tech Symposium for a decade now, and having worked on the book, it's all over the place. So if someone has a passion for this, and most people don't, let's be honest, I'm sure you all feel kind of lonely in this area too. Let's just collaborate. Let's have more means to doing it. There isn't a specific person or company. It's just all of you guys.
Well, I'm going to open the floor so that all these other people who have a lot to say can ask some questions.
Open the floor sounds like a trap door is opening. But yeah, I mean, I can't easily see that the text, this is ironic question. So if there's anything that's been typed and not addressed, would you like to speak it? Or Valentina, is there any obvious to read out?
There's just a flurry of text and lots of conversations going on. So I think it's best if people just raise their hands and see whether they have any particular question that they want to ask you right now. I was going to say one thing about collaboration. You might want to mention your open office hours.
Yeah, I saw that. I see Miguel saying, where's the community to discuss and exchange ideas and resources? I do have open office hours on Mondays and Fridays, an hour earlier than we had today, where it really varies who is there, but it's always interesting. And you're all invited. I will be changing, we've been using this ID, this the Zoom ID, but I think it's time to probably change that now because it's spread a little bit too wide. So that's one place where you're free to come in, but you know, we need to figure out how to collaborate. I'm having this at 6 o'clock UK time, 7 o'clock Central European for you, Valentina, ruining your Wednesday evening, because of all the Californians that I wanted on board. Because California, especially Stanford campus, is an amazing place to have amazing dialogues about this. But I've been doing it for so many years, and it tends to become very, very vague in the beginning, and then someone has a very specific idea and pulls people. It becomes very messy. So we have to be careful and work on the C-level ourselves. Hence, the open office hours now are very, very general. If someone wants to start something with some kind of a blogging community or other meetings, I'll definitely help spread the word. Sorry that was a lot of waffle. But yeah, please get in touch with me if you're interested in the Monday or Friday. Yes, Ethan?
Yeah, so I actually just sent a link to a tweet, and the tweet is kind of a few different Twitter users' attempts to unite this whole like interlinked thinking movement. And I think this kind of thing would definitely thrive there. It lists out like 20 odd different users.
Okay, I see that. Okay, that's definitely worth having a look at. Thank you.
Yep, anytime.
Hi, this is Lisa. I was just going to say I appreciate the connection to the kind of emotional kind of assessment of students and scanning maybe through documents or other softwares, because there have been some databases where bots are being built by cloud-based softwares to interact with students, especially for campus-based information during this time. And one of them is to assess red flags for students who may be at risk, who are maybe their GPA may be impacted or overall. And so I'm just going to say I find that aspect really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. That's something Timur and I talked about. You know, being a teacher, so much nonsense. And what happens when you're a teacher? These active students are the ones you see. The ones that are kind of in the background may be the ones you need. So yes, we should do more. Another thing we thought about, if you have a reading device like an iPad or something, basically analyze everything the student does, provided you have sufficient anonymity and sufficient security and permissions and all of that. It should know how loud the room is where the student is reading, maybe, how long they read in one sitting, maybe in proximity to other students. So you could flag up things like they're always alone, that's an issue. Or why are they always reading short snippets with loud music only with their friends? Are they not paying attention? You know, huge privacy concerns, of course. But these are things we need to look at if we're going to expand these kinds of interactions.
Yeah, so there are certain learning management systems that will show how long students are logged in and when they log in different times of the day as well.
I have a question. If I have a book, like in PDF, like an old book and with chapters, so how would I add visual meta? It would, what would the end result look like? It would just attach maybe final 2 pages to this document, and I would edit. If OCR was too hard, I could just copy each chapter title into that. And did I understand correctly? So last 2 pages would be this structure visible.
Yes. So Valentina, could you please put the link in chat for futuretextpublishing.com? So the book, which is available for free, The Future of Text, that many here contributed to, has visual meta attached to the last 2 pages, exactly as you said. I did that manually in InDesign because it was created in InDesign. So everything is just normally typed. If you use Author, it'll make it for you automatically.
Okay, and does this parse the same way when you have libraries from for different programming languages? How hard is it to get out of PDF? It's probably not trivial, but it should work 100% reliable. How to parse it exactly?
For the reader software or to
No,
add?
for any open software. So made with everything, with anything, and parsable in a consistent way. So not a single letter is changed because it's JSON. It cannot be mistakes. And you have to
exactly. So the thing about PDF is it's a gosh darn awful format. Adobe just released something called Liquid View, which I found amusing, having used the Liquid name for decades. And they admitted that they used machine learning to get some structure into a PDF. It's awful. So what we've done with the visual meta, as you know, it's on the last page, but at the very last page, sorry, the last word is at visual meta. So the software that parses the document, the PDF viewer that parses the PDF, looks for that at the end of the document and goes backwards. So it doesn't go through the whole document to begin with. So even within something this plain as having basically BibTeX, there are techniques we have to go through to get around the messiness of PDF.
Thanks.
If you want to add visual meta to your own documents, I would love to discuss that. You can go to the Visual Meta website, of course, and copy the descriptions there, but it's also really, really wonderful to have a human discussion of what should this field do. As Jack Park and I discussed many, many years ago, and we were talking about APIs and object-oriented programming, as long as something says what it is, it can always be parsed later. So if you want to add a field to Visual Meta for some data you're putting in, as long as you say what it is, for instance, one of the expected plans for Visual Meta as it is when you have locations or units. Let's say there's a very specific location in the document. In the Visual Meta, it'll show that when you're talking about, let's say, Dublin, the city of Dublin, that means latitude, longitude, this and this. And this is crucial. It also says, this is said in this type of coordinate system. So you don't just give the data, you make it explicit what kind of data it is. You know, you never say it's 2 meters long. Well, I guess that's exactly, you say 2 and 2 meters and you explain what it is. Yeah, David?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if my comment might seem a little orthogonal to the conversation. But, you know, in the field of needs assessment, the key question that you ask is, for what problem is this the solution, right? So we're looking at all the affordances of hypertext and digital information. And we're saying, look at all the things you can do with it. And I don't think, this is just my observation, and it's biased because my background is largely in learning sciences, that we don't tie the technology closely enough to our understanding of how people learn. So for example, the ability to pull up references using visual meta instantly in context of the document could be seen as a way to facilitate chunking of information. So as you do multi-document sense making, you have pieces of information in your head that are from the same document because you've associated those ideas with particular authors and particular documents. So this can facilitate memory. But to me, the problem of the 21st century information age is, how do we combine pieces of information from multiple online sources and the collective intelligence of groups to produce something of value, to solve challenging problems, to come up with innovative ideas to help save the planet. So I would like to see, you know, some kind of parallel conversation on how the technology and the augmented intelligence, what are we augmenting? What processes, and how does the technology support learning, you know, associative learning and memory, which is a big part of creativity. How do you activate the things that you know combined with new information that you're taking in?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that parallel conversation too. And please, as you already have, David, I'm suggesting to everyone else, please go to the book's website and have a look at the launch page for the second edition, where the kind of spiritual, emotional, or whatever you want to say, side of it is clear. But the oldest tool that I showed you today is the Liquid tool. It's at least 10 years old, and everybody who uses it loves it, but it's very hard to explain to people what it is. That's the one where you can instantly get a reference or whatever. The reason for that tool being developed is the notion of a spark point. You read something and you go, huh? And it's when you have this tool and you learn the basics of it, to look it up in almost any search engine takes less than half a second. And it burns so little sugar in your brain that you don't really notice it. Doug had the analogy of building interactions that were like skiing downhill. If you have to tell your skis what degree angle left to go, you're going to fall over. It has to be very, very, very smooth. So as part of that pedagogical issue of supporting and nourishing, curiosity, the tools have to give answers as fast as possible. So there is, in what we're doing here, it is being addressed, but of course, it is a much, much bigger space that we all need to try to get together on. Oh, very quiet now, or is that everything in the chat? Yeah, we're quite a bit over time, which is I very much appreciate. Any final questions or comments or suggestions, or anybody saying this is how we should all go together? Yes, Ethan?
Yeah, I'm curious as to the visual meta medium. So you said it was for big text, but I'm wondering if that could be expanded.
My son is going to bed. He's being a bit loud. Let me just close the door. Sorry.
Okay.
Hey, God. Not so loud, please. Sorry, he's 3.5, and how can I not listen to everything he does? Yes, please go on.
Yeah. I'm curious about visual meta as a larger format for citation. So right now, is it restricted to BibTeX? If I'm understanding you right.
It's the first bit is BibTeX because it handles that stuff really well, and it's the normal stuff for citation. This bottom bit is JSON. That's where we have the headings and the authors.
So do you think that could be used? Do you think that within the visual meta protocol that we could include something like a way to cite code from other people or a way to cite, like if you authored code, then when you shared it, then at the bottom of it, it would have your citation info, so then you could get credit for it.
I think that's very, very interesting. And I think while I'm digesting that, in Final Cut, the video editing software, you have something called auditions. So you can say, I like that edit, click a button, or I like this edit for sections. I could imagine you could cite code, yes, absolutely. But you could also cite different kinds of code. So for the bits that is visually available and running, the visual meta could say, there are actually other ways, something you could replace it with if you would like to. Does that make sense, or was that just weird?
Yeah, it does. And that's even cooler than I was getting at. And I'm curious too about other mediums, like websites, videos, music, those sort of things. Do you think this could have implications on those as well?
Yes.
Nice.
The reason it's PDF is just because PDF is, I hated PDFs. Les Carr will remember my first presentation as a PhD student. I had one slide, I said, PDF is awful, and I was slaughtered for it. And it took me a while to understand that freezing a document is actually really important in academia. So then under Dave Millard's tutelage, what I'm trying to do for my own PhD with the visual meta work is to ignore everything that happened in digitization of academia, taking the benefits of robust documents and giving them magical digital stuff, because links break and links rot.
Hi, Fred. I think you were introduced as me as punishment for insulting PDFs.
Oh my God.
But for me, the big part of this isn't so much the visual meta, and I'll have another argument with Fred about that another time, but it's when we copy and paste, we leave so much information on the table, it's nuts. And we invented copy and paste back when computers only ran one program at a time and things. And now when we're copying from, we're not copying and pasting, we're creating references with a quote in and throwing all the reference information away. So it's not just, what Fred's got here isn't just the fact that it copies it, it remembers the context with no extra work. Because I spend copy and paste, I don't think about I say Control C, and I don't even use Control C because I'm on a Mac. But I don't think about it, I just do it, and my fingers do it. And we need to be preserving a lot of that record like that, not having to sit down and use a reference manager. I've tried. I hate research, it's why I failed a PhD really. I hate reading and writing research, and that's part of it. It's agonizing and stupid. Not like the tools just suck, and still, man, we need to do better. Sorry.
No, sorry, Chris. I just want to remind you and everyone that this came out of, the copy came out of our discussions because I wanted desperately to have high resolution copying. And you had already looked at stuff with Ted Nelson to do that, to address spans. And the term augmented copy is what you called it. So thank you for that. And yes, we discussed a little bit earlier, the power of having rich copies. And by the way, I just wanted to say hi to you, Harold. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even be in academia. Everybody tried to fail me, but for some reason, when I was doing my master's, Harold said no. So thank you. I think I saw one hand move somewhere, or was someone just stretching? Okay, yeah.
It was mine. I was just going to add to what Chris said, and thinking back to those same talks that he was referring to, another bit of the sort of lineage of this being BibTech and things like that was simply that it's something that's robust and works. It doesn't do everything. But as you've seen with the example before and the use of JSON, as long as something says what it is, even if every parser can't use it, it ought to be able to go away, dereference it if necessary. So it's actually quite extensible. And one of the things that I remember Chris brought up when we were talking about this a long while ago is also the fact that if people are putting basically less messy citation back into the system, that actually improves things for everyone. So next time you download another PDF, the chances of the citations actually just being plain wrong, as they very often are, will be lessened. So there's actually a benefit in just sort of pump priming the whole citation circuit and improving knowledge interrelation that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that. Timur, Irina, you guys?
Yeah, thanks for the great chat and great presentation. Well, I have a question on the graph visualization. Have you thought about like basic scenarios on how these graphs could be like pre-installed and after that like parsed with the help of ML or something else? If we talk about the further development of this app, and what if yes, if you thought about these different like ways or scenarios, so what exactly you thought about?
It's been a long time since Timur and I sat and had dinner in Croatia. That was a that level question. On a very, very simple level, I think that as a teacher-student relationship for younger students, there's nothing wrong with having templates. You're doing a science thing. Make it clear where the method is and all of that stuff. Why should a teacher have to go through Divergent Prose every single gosh darn time? So what you're highlighting here, I haven't thought about at all, but to have a dynamic view that already has components in it to help study the text you're adding to it, or to have it study what someone else has written, is very provocative. One thing I did have in the pre-design days was you have a dynamic view of a document, and you type in a keyword. I remember I always used Ted Nelson for some reason, and it would draw lines to all the different occurrences in the document by thickness. So you could see where Ted Nelson was mentioned. So I could imagine then a document where you already have these kinds of searches or magnets pre-populated for the terms that you're interested in. So when you open a document, it automatically shows you where those bits are. So it's kind of like the visual color glossary, but you're already getting rid of all the stuff that is not within the magnets or nodes or keywords that you're interested in. This is something, this is the kind of visualization we need to have dialogues on. Basically, I love text, but you know, this is one of the opening bits that I printed out. It is both absurd and obscene that we're still dealing with gray columns of text most of the time. We really need to go and have it intelligently change shape for us to grasp what's going on. Does anyone have anything to contribute to that bit of the conversation? Particularly, or yeah, Ethan, please.
Yeah, so graph visualization is actually, that's a huge thing for all the people in this niche. They all say the same thing, how they want it to be totally interactive. So they're all looking into that. So there's progress being made to that. And I'm going to send a link in the feed for a guy that's doing work in that, and he's also relating that to philosophy and math, and how that's actually been it's nothing new with Doug. That's actually like an ancient thing, how they wanted to visualize their ideas and things of that sort.
That's really cool. Thank you. The thing is, as I like to say, a node is not a neuron, right? When you go into the kind of graph community, and as I mentioned, I have a visual arts background. I like it to be visual, but you can't just make a taxonomy and then do connection and expect the knowledge to be there and you can plug it into someone else's knowledge space and you have total harmony. The world and the human brain is way too complicated for that. So the small space that I'm trying to work on is literally the back of a paper napkin. Most of our users use a 13-inch computer, which is kind of crazy. So we're really trying to optimize that use. You know, I've been using a 16-inch machine, which I have right here, and even that's bigger than most of our users. So the idea of having stuff on the walls or a 27-inch screen or whatever, for people authoring and reading, they're not going to use that. So that's why I'm very wary of going into the visual space thing with too many elements. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, I think so much of the focus of Doug's work that you've been presenting that's fascinating is the human side of computers. You know, how they augment our thinking. And I'm curious if there's a resource that's out there that takes the cognitive side of things, this, let's say the cognitive psychology side of things, and just tries to lay out and say, here are the areas, here are the processes that we can think about as we're building tools. So there's our visual element of thinking, but that's like one part of things. Is there anywhere a resource that says, here are the ideas, the psychological ideas that we should be thinking about?
I haven't found much in a specific way, but I think the new executive brain, forget the name of the author, but you'll find it on Amazon, is phenomenal in explaining our hemisphere and our prefrontal cortex in ways of how we learn and then think that inspires this. There is also a lot of early years pedagogy. I mean, my son, 3.5, if he says a sentence wrong and I correct him, he'll repeat it correctly. You know, he will very soon be irritated at data. He will say, data, shut up, right? We all know that. So there are different stages, but I think, Timur, this seems to be more your realm. Do you have anything specific to comment on neuroscience and how it will help us design systems to really build those?
Yes, hi, but I don't think that there is one common and well-grounded idea of how psychological functions or underlying neurological functions are. So I don't know of any well-established map that could be used for mapping, because there are too many of them. They depend on approaches, of course. So there's this space is populated very densely.
Well, may I add, there is a theory, it's called cognitive load theory, and it's not new, but I think that this is exactly the time for this theory to to rise again. And there is definition of external cognitive load that is exactly about how the information is presented to the student. And if this form is suitable for the student individually, yes, and how it can be like perceived in efficient or not in efficient way. So there is lots of interesting things inside. For example, internal cognitive load, that is depends on student on his ability to work with the information. And the third cognitive load is germane. So this is about how the student really motivated to get involved in this work with this information. And it's, I think this is the like point to work with, yes, and to work with the text representation for different kind of cognitive loads.
I think it's really, I'm really glad you mentioned that. There's one thing that, Valentina, you're supposed to stop me and reminded me of earlier. Right before I did the demo, I wanted to say that it is a very brief demo, relatively speaking, because I do try to remove stuff as much as add stuff. I mean, the prime feature of that, the cognitive load of dealing with citation management is huge. Copy and paste is not. The cognitive load of opening a web browser, going to a site, typing in a keyword is substantial. Doing a half-second keyboard shortcut is not. So that's something that I'm very interested in. But we absolutely need to get neuroscientists, and I know only a few, and I know you and Timur understand this area, need to help with practical things like this. Yes, absolutely. You know, when is things too messy on the screen, you don't get a clue, and so on.
Well, at least we can, well, yes, we can find like links, proper links to look into, yes, and to translate some of our texts about this area. So we can share it with society. So I think with the community, yes, that could be interesting to explore.
Great. I'm going to make sure it doesn't become one of those fizzly out parties too much, so I will end it now. With great thank you to all of you who are left. And to continue the conversation, if any of you want to come in on the Monday, Friday meetings or just on Twitter, if you have other communities that you're part of that you want us or think anyone here should go into, I at least know I would be very, very happy to do so. And yes, we're going to archive the chat. Who does that? I click file, right? Anyone want to write something in the chat before I save it? I think we can save the chat to your computer. Make sure I don't mess it up before we all log out. Well, that's very annoying. This is taking too. Okay, I can't do that. Valentina, do you want to try to do it? I don't want to lose this chat. Let's see.
Frode, I've done it, and you will get it when you get the recording as well. So,
oh, of course, that's true. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Nice to see so many new people and so many familiar, not old people. Bye for now. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Bye.